The Greek word Timothy is Timotheos, and it comes from a compound use of two Greek words, Timna, which is 5092 in Strong's Concordance, meaning honour, and Theos, 2316 in Strong's Concordance, which of course means God. So Timothy literally means to honour God, or honouring God. If we go to the book of Timothy, Paul's letter to Timothy, in chapter 5 verse 17, there's a verse which people love to appeal to claim that ministers deserve a big salary. It says this, and I'll read to verse 19, 1 Timothy chapter 5, 17 to 19. Let the elders who rule well be counted worthy of double honour, especially those who labour in the word and doctrine. For Scripture says, you shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain, and the labourer is worthy of his wages. Do not receive an accusation against an elder except from 2 or 3 witnesses. Now, the word honour here is timna, the same word which is used in the word Timothy. It means honour. It has no reference whatsoever to money. And the reason why double honour is appealed to is that you see in verse 3, 1 Timothy chapter 5 verse 3, it says honour widows who are really widows. Honour means respect. So when we read in verse 17 that elders who rule well in the church are worthy of double honour, all that means is that elderly men are worthy of honour for their age, first of all. But they're worthy of a double honour if they work in God's church and do their job or their function in God's church well. That's simply the meaning of double honour. It's not saying we should throw money at them, or that ministers are somehow worthy of huge pay packets and lots of perks and pensions, free house, free car, etc., etc., etc. Now, it does say that you shan't muzzle an ox while it's treading out the grain. All this means that while the ox went round in a circle, operating the millstone which milled corn, it was allowed to eat the corn that fell on the ground. Likewise, the labourer who works for somebody is worthy of his wages. Now, these are analogies to demonstrate that the elder who works well, who rules well in God's church, is worthy of double honour. He's, as I said, worthy of honour because he's an elderly man, but if he does the job in God's church well, then he's entitled to double honour. The context is not money, but honour, because if you look at verse 19, it says, do not receive an accusation against an elder except from 2 or 3 witnesses. This has nothing to do with money. It's to do with honour. If somebody says that this elder has done something bad, then you need multiple witnesses. The context is the honour of a man in God's church, not receiving money. This same Greek word is used in 3 other passages. In 1 Timothy chapter 5 verse 3, it's applied to widows. Honour, timna, widows who are really widows. Does this mean that they were paying widows money? Well, of course not. It's honouring them, respecting them. But you see, if you claim that double honour in verse 17 means money, then the same Greek word in verse 3, honour widows, must also apply to money. You can't say one applies to money and one applies to honour. It's the same Greek word. Likewise, servants, and that also includes slaves, are to count their own masters worthy of all honour. 1 Timothy chapter 6 verse 1. So servants or slaves are to honour their masters. The same Greek word, timna, for honour. Does this mean that the slaves were to pay their masters money? Of course not. It's to do with respect, honour. Well, in that case, if timna, honour, means honour and not money in chapter 6 verse 1, then the same Greek word timna, double honour, must also apply to honour, respect, and not to money in 1 Timothy chapter 5 verse 17, where it says the elders who rule well must be counted worthy of double honour. Finally, in Ephesians 6:1, children are to honour their parents in the Lord. Does this mean that the use of the word honour, timna, means that children are to pay their parents money? Or does it mean they're to give them respect? So this whole argument is totally ridiculous. There is a case that people can apply to say that ministers should be paid a salary. I might deal with this later on in this tithing series, though it's really outside the issue of tithing. But whether ministers are to be paid or whether ministers are not to be paid, let's get one thing absolutely clear. 1 Timothy chapter 5 verse 17. Elders who rule well are to be counted worthy of double honour. This does not apply to money, and you cannot use this verse unless you twist it completely out of its context to somehow imply that ministers are entitled to a big wage or salary. One final point I'd like to make is this. In the Old Testament, when the Levites and the priests worked at the tabernacle and at the temple, it's probable that only the high priest and the captain of the guard worked full-time and were paid full-time. The rest of the workers were split into courses, so the priests and the Levites were split into 24 courses or different groups, and each of these groups would work at the temple for approximately a period of 2 weeks and receive wages approximate for 2 weeks' work. We don't find in the Bible thousands and thousands of Levites and priests, each of whom received a chariot and a golden chariot, and a stable and stable boys to look after their horses or donkeys, which pulled the chariot, and free house, and free togas, and free clothes, and free holidays abroad, and big salaries, full-time salaries, big pensions. When you worked in the temple, you worked for approximately 2 weeks, and you got 2 weeks' wages. So if tithers wish to say that their ministers are entitled to be paid as the Levites and the priests in the Old Testament were paid, then bear that in mind. Very, very few people, probably only the captain of the guard and the high priest, were paid full-time wages for full-time work. The rest of them were just part-time. Thank you.